Picking up here in part 2 of chapter 9, this section is on relationship communication. When we're talking about relationships, there are so many different theories that we can look at, so many different pop culture ideas that are often not very accurate. Then there's pop psychology, and then there's real psychology. But of course, what we're talking about is the communication that goes into relationships. The more effective we are with our communication, oftentimes the more effective our relationships will be. If we are poor communicators, we're going to have poor relationships. Those two things just go hand in hand. The main theory discussed in this part of the chapter is one called social penetration theory. It's a weird name, but it simply talks about how deep our conversations go, as well as the amount of topics that we cover. That's what breadth and depth mean here. Breadth is the number of topics that a pair of people will talk about within a relationship, whether they be friends or romantic partners, or family members even. So the relationships that we have are often reflected in what we talk about. So if you have a friend that they're your sports friend, that's all you ever talk about with them is sports. And if you were ever together for an extended period of time, you might run out of things to talk about. Then you don't have a very deep relationship. So the breadth of subjects discussed is important, and then also the second portion of that is the depth, how personal the conversations about those things are. So the amount of self-disclosure that goes into them, the amount of personal feelings expressed through those conversations. Obviously, we're not talking about conversations regarding sports here. We're talking about other things. Relationships, just like most things, require maintenance. And so the deeper the relationship, oftentimes it would seem the more maintenance is going to be required. That makes sense. But any relationship is going to take some maintenance. So here's a list of things we can do to help maintain those relationships that we have. It's one of them maybe just reaching out. Reach out to the person you haven't talked to in a little bit. They're your friend. See how things are going with them, whether that's inviting them over or just having a conversation via text or any number of things. But reach out to them. Be nice, polite, open, whatever the standard norm is for your relationship as far as openness. I mean, you maintain that. We typically avoid criticism in those relationships unless it's criticism that's for the other person's benefit and not for our own benefit. Give assurances that the relationship that you have is significant. You care about your friendship. You care about your relationship. Another thing that helps build relationships and maintain them is sharing joint activities. Many of us have those friends, and the older you get, the more of these friends you have. Those that every time you see them or you talk to them, you say, hey, we need to get together. We need to get together and hang out sometime. We need to go to a movie. We need to do these things. And of course, the busier we are, the harder it is to maintain all those things. But even the statement, we need to do this, is going to help maintain the relationship, that we value that friendship. But we want to share in those joint activities when we can, because shared space helps build the relationship. We want to be positive and empathetic as well. Positive just generally with our communication, and then empathetic, we've talked about empathy many times, but that's feeling what the other person is feeling and expressing that their feelings are important. And then another thing that we can do is try to improve ourselves, to make ourselves a better friend, a better romantic partner, a better son or daughter, whatever it may be. In part 1 of chapter 9, we talked about the fact that relationships do deteriorate over time, but we can sometimes see those things ahead of time, recognize the problems, and try to repair them. So it may be important to recognize the patterns of deterioration. Things like withdrawal. You start seeing that friend less. Or they withdraw from your social media. They don't comment on your things as often as they used to, your posts. And you have the word depenetration. So we're talking about social penetration theory here. The deeper and more topics you cover, this is the opposite. When you can only find a few things to talk about. And you used to be able to talk about all kinds of things, but your interests lie in different places now, or you just don't talk about much. That's a sign of relationship deterioration. If you notice a decline in self-disclosure, where they used to tell you all about their day and how they felt about things, and now they hardly say such things, that's a sign of deterioration. Deception begins to increase. Oftentimes that's a sign of deterioration within the relationship as well. Also, things like, well, the messages that we receive. When a relationship is deteriorating, positive messages will decrease, negative messages will increase. Continuing on, this idea of disintegrating relationships or deteriorating, dissolving relationships, you may start to encounter messages, or you may give messages that have a positive tone. If you want to end a relationship, people will say things like, I really like you, but I just can't see this going anywhere. Can we still be friends? Or there's a much more negative situation, negative identity management, where someone will blame the other partner for why the breakup is happening or why we can't be friends. I just can't stand what you do. I can't stand this or that. Or sometimes it's much more logical. And there's a justification, giving reasons why a couple may not be able to maintain their relationship. And then there's the idea of de-escalation, which is where someone just stops showing up. They just disappear. Or at the very least, they start putting more distance between them. Or whenever they are together, there are friends around, and there's never any one-on-one time, or at least to a much lesser degree. These are all indicators that the relationship is coming to an end if it's a close personal relationship, oftentimes. So if you get to that point, and it is a romantic relationship that has deteriorated and dissolved, then people have to deal with the breakup. So the first thing, whenever you lose a friend, and this may come from various places. It may be a breakup, it may be someone moved away, it may be a death. Something that people have a tendency to do is withdraw from other people. Withdraw socially from all friends, or at least the majority of them, and then just spend time alone. That's a bad idea. Studies show that we have a much higher risk of depression whenever we do those kinds of things. Humans are social creatures, as I said in the first lecture. We need to be around people, and so the recommendation is to be active and be social. It's not suggesting that you forget about the sadness of a breakup or losing a friend, but withdrawing will lead to negative things. It's also suggested that after a breakup, you take some time to heal and to reevaluate things instead of just jumping right back into dating. So, in other words, they say be social, but don't look for a close, intimate relationship or romantic relationship, especially if you're just coming off of a breakup from a very close relationship. Take time out. But also, they say don't swear off of relationships either. Find that happy middle ground. Bolster your self esteem. A lot of times, especially if they're the ones that were broken up with, not the ones who did the breaking up, their self esteem will plummet. And so, do things that you know you're good at, or develop new hobbies that you think you'll be good at. Showcase those things. Do things that you can be proud of. Another thing to help yourself heal from that process, to deal with it, is to remove or avoid relationship symbols. This may be gifts that were given, clothing, jewelry, pictures on the wall, or it may be a place or a set of places that you used to go with that person. So we should avoid them at least temporarily. However, they suggest that, especially in the case of gifts and things like that, don't get rid of them entirely. It's better for you to go ahead and keep them, just keep them out of sight until the healing process is complete. Because those reminders may actually be pleasant in your future, whereas right now they're painful. Then the last thing there is become mindful of relationship patterns. Some people have the tendency to keep going back to the same patterns, the same type of people, to date and those kinds of things, and then they keep experiencing the same kind of breakups, the same kind of disappointments. So be mindful of the patterns that you might set yourself up for, but at the same time, don't be so down on yourself that you avoid all relationships, and at the first sign of trouble, you just assume it's going to all go south. Remember, many relationships can be repaired. So, speaking of repairing relationships, I'm going to look lastly here, the last couple of slides, at a brief method of repairing relationships. The first step, as with many things, is to recognize that there's a problem. Recognize and evaluate it and interpret it, figure out what the problem is, and then figure out where it comes from. Now, that second step is to engage in productive communication. So sit down with that partner of yours in this relationship, be it romantic, platonic, or family, and talk about perspectives. This is what I see, what do you see? And talk about things from both sides. Be empathetic, be positive, own your own feelings. Remember, no one can make you angry, no one can make you upset. We allow ourselves to become angry, bitter, upset. And so own the feelings that you have. They weren't caused by someone else, but from our own internal processing. Use active listening techniques. Just talking at the other person isn't good enough. You need to really listen. Listen empathetically. Listen with the intention to understand the problem and not to evaluate the person. And then, of course, keep channels of communication open so that, if your goal is to repair the relationship, you never know in what way you will receive a message. The next step is to propose possible solutions. How can we fix this? Don't insist on using yours alone, but talk through both partners' ideas. Get all those ideas out there on the table and decide what we might do in order to repair this relationship. Another positive action to repair a relationship is to affirm one another. There's something called cherishing behaviors, especially in romantic relationships. It's the little things, oftentimes nonverbal, that we will do to indicate that we care for the other person, that we cherish them. It may be as simple as a hug or a kiss. or holding hands or something like that. It can be any number of things that indicate care and the fact that you cherish that person. It's even suggested to help repair things that each partner make a list of cherishing behaviors that they appreciate, that they recognize, and then trade lists. And then the partners should both try to make it a daily occurrence. Making an effort, and it may be awkward at first, but if you're trying to repair, especially a romantic relationship, awkward can be the name of the game. And so that shouldn't be something to deter you from trying to engage in those things. And then once you've nailed down what solutions you're going to try, integrate those solutions into your daily life. Do them. Make that effort. And then another thing that we might do to help repair a relationship is take risks. Don't be afraid to be the first one to say you're sorry, to take action to help repair things, to bring up problems without blaming, of course. These are all risky behaviors because they may upset the status quo, but if the relationship is heading toward dissolving and you don't want it to, the status quo is something that you want to upset. But be careful of how you do so. Do so in a caring manner in order to help restore that relationship.